Welcome back to Breakfast Television. It is World Cancer Day, so surgical oncologist Dr. May-Lin Kwan is here now to talk about the latest developments in cancer, like how cancer treatments are becoming more precise, which is great news for patients, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow. So tell us how this is happening.
For sure. So, cancer treatments have always been focused on the stage of the cancer and whether or not we can improve your outcomes by providing you with treatments. So historically, for example, in breast cancer, if the cancer was a certain size and perhaps in the lymph nodes, your oncologist would say, well, we need to do surgery, and then we'll give you a hormone tablet and chemotherapy, and that will help you in the long run.
Right.
So that's a pretty broad category.
Sure.
And a lot of patients fall into that group, and it doesn't take into account the tumor itself. So now we're actually taking the tumor and pieces of, for example, your tumor, having it tested for genomic assay. So they're taking your tumor and they're looking at the molecular signature. So what kind of behavior does your particular tumor have? And based on that, we can get a score. And the score will tell us whether or not there's a high risk of it coming back or a lower risk of it coming back. So if you have a high risk, the oncologist can say, actually, yes, you really should have the chemotherapy because it will likely benefit you. Whereas if you actually have a low score, before when we would have said, well, it's this size and has these characteristics, you should have chemo, but you actually have a low score. Now the oncologist can work with the patient and say, well, you have a low score, so maybe you can just have the hormone tablet, which obviously is much nicer for the patient. It's more tailored, and we're more likely to get the benefits in the women who are going to get the benefit and not harm, because chemotherapy has side effects, the women who are not going to benefit. So that's extremely exciting in terms of being more tailored to not only the patient, but her tumor.
Oh, this is great news.
Absolutely.
What about things like immunotherapies? We're hearing a lot about this as well.
Absolutely. So immunotherapies is definitely the new area that we're really investigating, and what scientists are doing is looking at specific receptors and parts of the pathway. So for example, in melanoma, melanoma historically has been either a very well-treated disease, very easy and people do well, or advanced. And in the past, when patients had advanced melanoma, our options were relatively limited, and outcomes tended to be poor. More recently, we've discovered that the immune system is in charge of fighting cancer cells, and we have certain receptors that can put the brakes on those cells that fight cancer or release them. So we have developed, well, not we, but targeted therapies, immunotherapies have been developed to block that so that the brakes are off and the cells can now fight cancer. So before, melanoma patients who were advanced had limited options, and now we actually have therapies that can allow them to live instead of months, years. So it's fantastic progress, absolutely, and this is being investigated in all different types of tumor groups, so it's really exciting.
Very exciting to say the least. Now, if we talk about breast cancer specifically, where you do a lot of your work, it's really changing here locally, isn't it? You've created all kinds of new pathways for these patients.
Absolutely. So in addition to looking at more personalized and precise therapies for patients, we're also looking at improving the patient experience.
Right.
So one of the most stressful times that my patients talk about is from the time that they know that there's something not right. So for example, they have a mammogram, the radiologist says, this is suspicious, I think you need a biopsy. That time period from figuring out, when you have to have the biopsy, what's going to happen, and then being, waiting for the results, and having
stressful.
The doctor refer you to me.
Yes.
That's a very stressful time, and it can actually take a really long time.
Right.
It's not anyone's fault, it's just the process. So what we did in Alberta, actually, and we've done it here in Calgary, is we've developed a pathway to sort of smooth that process out. So when you have a mammogram and there's an abnormality on there, and the radiologist recommends a biopsy, the family doctor who ordered the test is notified, as usual, but as well, the breast health clinic is also notified simultaneously. So that allows the family physician to have the opportunity to refer directly before the biopsy is even done.
Right.
The patient is introduced into our program. She's phoned by our nurse. She said, listen, the radiologist and your doctor want you to have this biopsy, so we're going to arrange that. This is what to expect.
Yes.
Then you'll meet Dr. Kwan.
Yes.
In the clinic these many days later, and bring a friend because she'll have the results of the biopsy, and that allows the family doctor, the patient, and the surgeon to work together, thereby really shortening that time period. We've shortened that time by half.
Which is incredible, by half.
By half.
Which is so important for these patients because it reduces that time when they're worrying so much.
Absolutely.
Dr. Kwan, we have to leave it there for time.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thank you for having me.